students and alums. Great. I work with UIC students and alums and helping them kind of navigate their transition to whatever they're going to do after graduation, resumes, cover letters, networking, interviewing prep, gap year planning, all those good things. So happy to be here with all of you and to work with AARCC on this event. And then I'll let our other co-hosts and hostesses introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Alton. I'm the Associate Director of the Asian American Resource and Cultural Center. I will be sort of running the tech and everything, so I'm in the background. But we're very happy to have you here. We're very happy to welcome back a handful of our alums and other UIC alums as well. It's always great for folks to come and be engaged.
And hello, my name is Allison Kung. I'm the Assistant Director for Education and Outreach at the Asian American Resource and Cultural Center. And I will be monitoring the chat. If you all have questions or things like that, please feel free to add them in the chat. I did want to also mention that this was Jeff and Missy had their idea of an alumni career panel, and me and Celeste also kind of had this idea of an alumni career panel. And together we've merged our ideas into one AARCC alumni career panel with the twist that we are going to be talking about job searching and working during COVID and kind of how that's different than usual. And so, yes, but if you do have any questions or anything, feel free to add it down in the chat. Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you for that. Like Jeff and Allison said, we've been working together on this event. We're really excited to facilitate this conversation. I know as a career advisor, I get a lot of questions from students and alums about what it's like to job search during COVID. Like, are people actually hiring? Is it possible? And even that transition from being a student to being a professional, I think can be kind of confusing as well. So we're excited to facilitate this conversation and hear from students who have been active with AARCC in some way, or I guess alumni, right? But when they were students were active with AARCC. This slide kind of just gives us the flow of the event. We'll have the panelists introduce themselves. We have some questions prepared. And like Allison said, we do want to hear what questions you have if you're a student or if you're an alum. And then we'll have an evaluation at the end. So we're excited to kind of move into having that. We'll have the panelists introduce themselves and get ourselves organized. So great. So thank you. Thanks, Jeff, for facilitating the slides. So we're going to have each of the panelists, and we do have 3. So we have Sonia, we have Giselle, and we have Adithian, and they're going to just introduce themselves, tell us their names, tell us, kind of where they're working now, what they're doing. And we'd also love to hear a little bit about maybe what they were involved with at UIC. And when you graduated. So I don't know if any of the panelists want to start, that would be great.
I'll go ahead. Hey guys, my name is Adityan. I use he, him pronouns. I graduated from UIC in 2016 with a bachelor's in science and bioengineering. Currently, I'm working as an analytic solution developer for an insurance company called Trustmark out in Lake Forest. I'm basically a data scientist. And what I was involved in UIC, I was heavily involved in AMP. I was a mentee and a mentor. I also worked with the Student Activities Board. I went to Honduras with Global Brigades and made houses and gave medical treatment. Yeah, those were kind of my main things. It's been a while actually.
Great, thanks so much. That's wonderful. Giselle or Sonia?
I can go next.
Great.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sonia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently working as a support engineer for a company called iManage. I studied a Bachelor's of Science of Civil Engineering with a concentration on transportation back in 2019. And I also minored in computer science. While I was at UIC, I was mostly involved through AARCC, so I did a lot of AMP mentoring, as well as I was a board member for AARCC, and I was very involved with the Muslim Student Association.
Wonderful, thank you.
everyone, my name is Giselle. My pronouns are she, her, hers. My current place of employment is IDEX. It's a veterinarian reference laboratory, and my position is a patient sample management technician. I studied BS biology at UIC. I graduated May of 2020, so right in the pandemic. And what I was involved in a lot. I was a mentee and mentor for AMP. I was involved in a lot of organizations that I don't want to name, too many. I was in executive boards for 3 of them and was public relations officer and webmaster.
Well, it sounds like our panelists were very busy and involved students at UIC, especially with ARC and some other student organizations. It was helpful to kind of get a sense of kind of what they're doing now and, professionally. So that was helpful. And so now we're going to actually dive in to a question that, again, I know I get a lot as a career advisor, and I'm guessing that Jeff and Allison even hear about it from students and alums, about job searching, especially during COVID. So we like to hear from the panelists about just your process. So think things like, did you get assistance with making your resume and cover letter? Did you prep for interviews? Just like, what was your process like as you were looking for a job and trying to secure employment? So I think that would be helpful. Obviously, a lot of it's maybe doing it virtually and can be confusing for students and alums. So whoever wants to start, but just tell us about your process for securing employment during the COVID-19 pandemic. And also, we just want to kind of hear from you about that. Probably could go in the same order, maybe, Adityan, if that's okay with you.
Sure. So I actually got my job roughly about a year ago. I celebrated my 1-year anniversary with the company last week. So I got lucky and I was able to get a job before the pandemic hit. Me and Sonia would always joke around that I'd find a job and then, a day later we'd be into a recession, and that's basically what happened. So I'm not really like, I really can't speak to how it is to search in the pandemic, but I will say that even outside of the pandemic, job searching is a long and difficult process. I must have sent out 500 applications for data sciences jobs over the course of a year, and maybe heard back from maybe 20 of them and got interviews for 10, of which were mostly phone interviews. And then I had 2 in-person interviews that ended up being 2 offers, and I picked this company over the other one. So I guess for me, it's a lot of kind of honing your skills, practicing interviewing. So not only practicing within the interviews that you're in, but also, talking to people, and just kind of getting used to just talking about what you do and kind of showing like the skills that you have. I think that's usually where people kind of get broken up and kind of struggle with that. So definitely if you can talk to like just, I don't know, your friends or your parents or whatever, and just explain what you're doing, that's a big step. And that's basically what I did. And that's what really like prepared me for my interviews.
Thank you. Those are great tips. And I think to your point, oftentimes you apply to a lot of jobs. Unfortunately, you don't always hear back. But that was great. Thank you for kind of explaining your process and the tips that you shared. Sonia, I think you're next. Can you tell us a little bit about the process for you?
Sure thing. So I had a job previously before the pandemic that I got straight out of college. And I actually lost that job mid-pandemic around the summer of last year. So for me, it was kind of this strange thing because I do want to touch upon this, where through college, a lot of us focus on building our skill set and our resume of what we're going to present when we get to the professional world. But something that I'd never thought of was what connections or networking you also do along that way. Because when it was approaching my graduation, I was kind of at a loss. I was like, okay, I can apply online, I can go to career fairs, but those are my only options that felt obvious to me. I didn't have a list of alumni or other companies, people I knew at places to reach out to. It was like, I've lost my 4 years at university to have networked up until this point. And it was this really scary feeling that I don't know how I'm supposed to apply to jobs and feel I have an edge over anyone else. And I think that's also something that students can recognize, that UIC has a lot of resources available. Just the career centers themselves, there are also specific colleges ones. You can reach out as an alumni, you can reach out while you're there. And that's kind of where I ended up starting when it came to my job search. And so that was my experience straight out of college back in 2019 before the pandemic. And so when I did lose my job due to COVID, I again was in a position of, well, where should I start? And that's kind of where I started. I reached out to the Engineering Career Center specifically because that's my degree. And I kind of worked with them to connect with their virtual resources, as well as just kind of feel like I had other people supporting me where I was looking beyond just applying online. And I think the mental aspect of applying during the pandemic is very difficult because you're putting a lot of effort into applying online, and that's kind of the main option you have available to you. So when you aren't hearing back, or you feel that it gets very mundane in that cycle of applying every day or every few hours for some people, that you wonder at the end, like, is this really going anywhere? And I think the mindset of just knowing that applying for a job is going to take time is very important, to feel that you're not lessening your self-worth. Like, your resume could be amazing, but it's really difficult to expect companies to hear back from them, even if you're applying to 20, 30 jobs a day, a week. It's a very, it's an experience that kind of whittles away at you. So just staying consistent in itself is a very important thing.
Thank you for that. Those are some great tips as well. And Giselle, I'd love to hear from you, and then we can kind of sum up some of the strategies you guys are suggesting. And Sonia said this is hard. Pandemic or no pandemic, I think job searching is can be a very long process.
For me, graduating in the middle of the pandemic, I was ultimately afraid of what the future was going to hold, because I knew the job market was really not great. And I decided, I'm going to research what I can do with my degree, because I didn't know what was out there that could, because biology is very broad and you can do a lot with it. So I applied to 10, 20 jobs a day, trying to just see. And in the moment, I did lose hope, but then I kind of reevaluated my goals and then kept going. And I actually did apply for school. And I think it's important to note that I am a graduate student at UIC as well. I'm a master's in education and urban higher education student. And I kind of like put that together, and I was like, I can also build on my resume while I'm also working, I guess. And I think that's a good note, that it's okay to, keep learning and keep learning on the job as well. And I honestly, when did I start my process? I started it after I graduated, which I don't recommend, just because you need to really start before you graduated and kind of network and just be able to speak to others and just kind of see what you're also interested. I actually reached out to a lot of alumni in different positions just to see how they're doing and see what I could also be interested in as well.
Thank you. Those, again, great tips. So just some notes that I took just to kind of think about all the tips and strategies that were shared. Is also just, this is difficult. Again, job searching is a process. My boss likes to say that job searching during COVID is a marathon, not a sprint. So I think that's just like a good thing to keep in mind. But a lot of all of the panelists talked a little bit about networking and how that's important. And I think sometimes that can be intimidating, right? But even thinking about like professors that you've had good relationships with, or advisors, or mentors, or even other students, and also UIC alumni that you can reach out to potentially via LinkedIn. Start small, start with sort of who's in your immediate network. Professors are a great place to start. And I personally think they're very neglected when students are sort of job searching. So it's just something to keep in mind. I think we also heard you have to be persistent. You do need to apply to a lot of positions, but the networking part is important because you can learn tips from folks who are maybe in positions that you're interested in. So those are just some of the kind of tips and strategies. And I think also Sonia talked about, like, it could be very demoralizing, right? Sometimes to apply to a lot of positions, you're not hearing back. So I think it's also important to try to engage in some self-care, whether that's with friends or family, just to make sure you're getting support because it can be complicated. And then Adityan had a great suggestion about practicing. So you could practice with friends and family, you can practice with career advisors in your own college, right? Engineering has a career center, College of Business has a career center, LAS has a small career center, public health does. And I work in career services, and we're here to help you as a student or as an alum work through these skills, so that when we have an interview, you're ready to go and you feel confident about how you're talking about your skills and experiences. So thank you. You all had really, I think, very helpful advice for all of us. So I think we're going to get to the next question as well. And so this is done a little bit, but I'd love to hear a little bit more. How did you stay motivated and focused during that job search? Especially the idea of doing a lot of it virtually, it can be overwhelming for folks. But yeah, tell us kind of your experiences and advice for us about staying motivated during that job search.
So I did struggle with this a lot in my job search, just because it was very long. My parents were kind of getting worried, and that made me get worried. And I think what really helped me was one, understanding that it's a process and it's going to take time. And as long as you do what you're supposed to be doing, which is applying, talking to people, networking, and just being yourself, it's going to pay off in the long run, and you just kind of stick it out. So I kept on telling myself that every day when I woke up. Aside from that, I did try to improve my resume. So I did a bunch of personal projects that really got the attention of a lot of people, and I kind of used that kind of negotiate into interviews. So like a lot of just kind of validating my emotions, but also understanding that it's a process, and then also just working on my craft and continuing to just, improve myself.
Thank you. And I think that's a good point. Sometimes the process can take a long time, but are there, computer programs you want to learn how to use software? Are there skills or things you can sort of do along the way as you're searching? Because you can absolutely add that to your resume. And employers also want to know you've been searching for a while. What have you been doing? I think that would be great kind of interview, things you can talk about in an interview. Okay, Sandhya, can you share your response to this question with us?
Yeah, so I think the first I really want to hit home on is being, like, as cliched as it sounds, being kind to yourself, because I know what my expectations when I graduated were very high, that I got this degree, so now I therefore will get a job in this industry and I'm going to work at it for the next year or 2 years. And I kind of set up these expectations that now that the degree was the hard part, once I find a job, it has to be the right one. And I think since that mindset change during the pandemic has kind of changed, where I'm more flexible with applying to different positions. Your job searching, it's a process. You don't necessarily need to be looking for the job description that sounds absolutely perfect. You don't need to necessarily be applying to the job descriptions that you hit all the requirements for. You can apply outside of your degree, you can apply in different industries. And I think that's kind of something that helped me stay motivated, because I was applying to different things. Specifically, since I'm an engineer, I know that overarchingly, I have a lot of problem solving skills. So I was trying to apply for different engineering positions, not even those that I was technically trained in. And I think that was very helpful for me to also be in touch with my friends from college to kind of see where they're at with their current jobs and see what other people's impression are of their industries or their job experiences, because just checking with other people or even alumni to kind of see what their experience has been very helpful to know you're not alone in the process, whether or not your friends are employed or whether or not they're happy at their particular job. I do know that due to the circumstances of the pandemic, there are a lot of friends of mine that are very happy to be employed, even though they aren't happy with their positions. So it's this interesting compromise that a lot of people are in. So knowing that you're not alone and focusing on kind of getting through the application process has kind of helped me. And because of there being a pandemic, you're allowed to not think that whatever trajectory your career was expected to take after graduation, it's going to be different, and it's allowed to be different. You don't have to justify in your head why you swapped industries for a little bit or why you took on a job you might not have considered earlier on. because the circumstances are different. So I think that's something we really need to acknowledge for our resumes. And I think ultimately that's kind of how I handled that. I didn't focus too much on personal projects because it, for me, stressed me out that I'm not in the industry I want to be in, and I find it harder to get back in touch with that. So that's kind of how I took that.
No, thank you. And I think, like you said, talking with folks like your friends and maybe people in your industry and out of your industry, sounds like you learned a lot of good advice and tips of sort of how to view your skills, which sounds like helped you as you were searching. Thanks for sharing. Giselle, what can you share with us about this as well?
A lot of what I was thinking about was actually was said by Sonia and Aditya already. What really helped me stay motivated and focused was just thinking about goals that I set for myself and just keeping those like in the top of my mind, like saying like, I want to be, you know, financially dependent on myself. I want to be able to be happy. And even if I'm not particularly happy in the job that I get, I do know that every job or every experience that I have is ultimately impacting the future that I can get into. And it's also networking wherever you go, whoever you're interviewing with, there's someone that you can still reach out to and say, hey, is there any position in your company that could fit me? Like just staying focused on the goals that I set out for myself really helped me a lot, and as well as talking a lot and talking to myself actually, because I talk a lot to others, but talking to myself really helps in terms of just verbally getting everything out there and getting it off my chest and being like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah, I think you guys have all shared kind of like being kind to yourself, and Giselle talking about kind of talking to yourself and kind of reminding yourself of your long-term goals and that these things are possible, but it's going to potentially take longer. Or Tanya talked a lot about being flexible with the kind of positions you're applying to or even the industries you're looking at. And I think especially during the pandemic, that's so important, right? Because some industries really are hiring a lot, but some industries aren't as much. And so you sometimes have to kind of shift your focus. But like Sonia said, you could learn a lot from a position that maybe you don't think is the best fit, but maybe something you're still actually really excited about as far as learning different skills and expertise. And I think the pandemic has been obviously difficult for all of us, but I think also kind of helps you think about, like if you have a job, right? Maybe it's not the perfect job, but like Sonia said, it's a job. And I think sometimes we can get kind of hyped up on the wrong things. So thank you all for being honest and talking about something that sounds like it was really challenging in a lot of ways, but you were able to kind of keep yourself focused and motivated. So thank you for that. I think maybe we'll move on to the next question. And I think this comes up a lot for folks, right, about your family, like how involved your family was in your job search. We already heard a little bit of some discussion about family. Some people feel like it's helpful when their family is very involved. Some families aren't as involved with that job search. So we'd love to just hear a little bit about, what this means to you and what you can share with us today.
So my parents were a big part of kind of my job search because I was living with them at the time. So they kind of were with me every step of the way and like through every kind of hurdle. So, like in some ways it's nice to have your parents right by your side, but it's also difficult when they don't necessarily understand that, the job market might not be great. And even if like on the news at the time, there's always something saying that's like, there's like 15,000 more jobs or whatever every month. That doesn't mean that I'm getting one of those 15,000 jobs. And it's hard for them to kind of understand that. And it was hard for them to kind of understand why I was struggling. But at the end of the day, they knew that I was trying to get hard. They supported me, and I really appreciate them for that. So I mean, I guess my advice is to always consider what the people in your life say, but at the end of the day, it's your life, it's your career, and you need to make the decisions for yourself, and you can't let someone else kind of dictate what you're going to do. So that's kind of my advice is, make your decisions.
Well, you got some claps for that. So it sounds like some other folks I think maybe can relate to what you're sharing. So thank you for that, Adityan.
I kind of had a unique circumstances with my parents because my dad had actually been unemployed before the pandemic hit, and then he was actually offered a job towards the beginning of last year. So he had been in that routine of applying to jobs and being very stressed out. And my parents had just gone through this journey of my dad getting a job. So when I had lost my job, they were kind of bracing themselves that now she's going to experience that. And so I think they were trying to be supportive in their own way. And their way of doing that for me was to kind of hold me accountable. So they would check in on me every day. Have you been applying to jobs? Did you apply at least to 10 today? And I think it was their way of just making sure I was applying enough and putting myself out there. But personally, for me, it was a source of stress because it was, I know my parents are going to ask me this later today. I don't think I'm doing enough. I felt put on the spot that no matter what I was doing, they would not see it as trying hard enough. And understanding that about myself, that that's kind of cause that was the result of what they thought was helpful, was a conversation I needed to have. Like, I appreciate you asking me about this, but I think it'll be better that you don't ask, and I'll be the one to tell you, like, hey, I applied to these many places today. I'm excited I accomplished that. Like, I'd rather share the good news of I got this done today at the end of it because I've accomplished it, rather than you check in on me, because that's a source of anxiety for me, that's something I still have to do today. And at least that's how it affected me. And it was specifically with my parents. But then I did have other friends that were graduating in 2020 and were also looking at the job market. And we would Zoom call each other or video call each other and apply together, or just be on the phone together and be like, okay, we have a half hour. I'm going to work on my resume, you work on yours. And having that camaraderie of people that you were working alongside with to get things done was a more helpful way for me. And so kind of finding what works for you and also being okay with setting boundaries with family is a pretty hard thing to do, but I think it's necessary, because adding to all the complexities of the situation when you're job hunting, I think just standing your ground on what personally helps you is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sonia.
For me, my family has always been very supportive about kind of what I wanted to get into. At first, like in the beginning of my undergrad, they were like, no, you have to do this, do this. But I think getting into my whole experience with job searching, they were kind of like, you know what, if you'll be happy in this, then do it. But then I turned like, okay, I can do this. And then I became a lot more transparent with everything with my family, and it helped. But it also was a little bit of a burden, just because now they're like, okay, you have to look at your financials, you have to do this. And that, I think, is the most stressful part about job searching, because they're very established in their careers, and I'm just starting out. And I think the job market is different now than it was back in the day. And the starting pay for someone like me who is out of college isn't as high as, some of us want. And it is just kind of the financial aspect really kind of hit me in terms of my family. And I think that part, it's being the transparent part, is like, it's a pro and a con, I guess. Yeah.
Well, again, I think all of you shared just sort of like your own unique journey and sort of like, how involved your family was, and whether your family is a source of support, right? Or whether your family maybe was a source of stress, maybe not intentionally, of course, right? But it's kind of a hard road to navigate. I think Sonia's kind of reminder for all of us about boundaries, and that I think she said it so well, like boundaries are so important to set, with our family and friends, but so difficult also to set. But I think it's just a really good point. And I think Giselle's point too, like the job market is different for people even searching, 10, 15, 20 years ago. It is different now. And I think that can be hard for people who job searched maybe a long time ago. It also depends on your industry. And also we have a pandemic. So there's a lot of variables there. And it sounds like, communicating to your family, like Giselle said, being transparent can be wonderful, but also can be difficult when, you and your family maybe have different values and sort of different priorities, and how do you sort that out? And especially what Adithian said, if you're living at home too, I think that just also adds kind of a different layer and an extra layer of just kind of challenges about how you navigate those conversations with your families. So I think we have another question. I think we have actually kind of covered it pretty well as far as advice. And we can always get back to that, but I was thinking maybe we might want to open it up if there's questions. Obviously, you can put them in the chat. Allison, I don't know if there's certain questions you wanted to start out with. People have been putting in the chat, but I did want to give us some time in case our attendees have questions, particular questions that they want to know from the panelists.
So far, there have not been questions in the chat.
Okay. Is there anyone? I don't know if attendees have questions or anything you want to know. Give you a minute potentially to put them in the chat. You could also unmute yourself. If you have a question, we could do it that way. But I always like to give that space. Sometimes I'm bad when I'm facilitating because there's so much to talk about. So anyone has any particular questions, throw them in the chat or unmute yourself. And if not, we can cycle back to the question that I skipped because maybe that might spark for people maybe some questions as well.
We do have a question in the chat. Question is, what from your college experience did you bring to an interview or you use in your current job?
Anybody want to take a crack at that one? That's a great one.
So I'm gonna modify this question a little bit for me. It's also what I didn't bring, and I think this is important to talk about because I feel like a lot of people get fixated on like what their major is, and like I have to get a job in bioengineering or I have to get a job in CS. And I've worked in a bunch of different jobs. I wanted to go to med school. I went to school for that. I worked for a nonprofit. I worked in a hospital. And I worked at this job right now. And what I've learned, your major really doesn't matter in terms of where your career can go. I have friends who were psych majors who are data scientists. I have friends who are photo majors who are now doctors. I couldn't, like in undergrad, I would never dreamed of being a data scientist. And I love my job and I love the place I am right now. So don't limit yourself. What I did learn and what I did kind of take away from my experience in undergrad is a lot of the soft skills. So like communication, professionalism, working with other people. Those things kind of go with you wherever you go. And I think in some ways they're a lot more important than the hard skills that people kind of fixate on. Because no matter what, you're going to have to work with other people and you're going to have to communicate and you're going to have to, write emails and go to meetings. And your ability to kind of work in those kind of situations is going to make you 10 times more attractive as a worker than anything else.
Thank you for that. Giselle or Sonia, anything else to add?
I'll go ahead. From my college experience, I feel like there's two different kind of answers you can expect. There's the technical side of the learning, and then there's the soft skills. And I think in an industry that's very much tech-based, people are always expecting you in interviews to bring forth more technical information or questions or projects or things like that to kind of talk about. And I think one really interesting experience since my recent job search was I was putting far more emphasis on the soft skills I had taken away from being involved in art. And that reflected in my interviews because I was trying to start conversations about the work environment. How were people of color being supported by your company? How do you value retention of different people, of people from different backgrounds? And I think that's something they were very unprepared for or not really expecting. And it's being transparent that that's something important to me, as well as something that I bring unique quickly to the table. There are not a lot of people that are willing to acknowledge that ethnicity and race affects a lot of things. And I feel in corporate America, that's a very difficult thing to approach professionally and have a conversation on. So being able to, excuse me, ask questions to know that you will be supported once you get started at an position was something very important for me to know that I'd be able to thrive at a company. So that was something I felt ARC and my involvement with AMP mentoring kind of prepared me to be better able to ask the right kind of questions to get those answers. So I think that was something that has also just benefited me from my job search, but also kind of surprised and made myself more memorable to those that I was being interviewed by.
Thank you for sharing that. And I guess I would also say that that helps you sort of sort out if this employer is the kind of employer that you, of course, like you're looking for a job, but is this kind of employer that you want to work for? Are they going to have the supports in place that resonate with you and that are going to help you do your job best? And so it's hard, right, of course, to advocate yourself in an interview situation, but like you said, Sonia, it makes them remember you and it makes them see what's important to you. And for some employers, that's actually very attractive as well. So I'm glad that sounds like your involvement with ARC was really beneficial in a lot of different ways, but even about sort of how to advocate for yourself in an interview. Giselle, anything else to add?
Yeah, for me, I think what I brought from my college experience to my current job is that work environment and coworkers matter in terms of like, if you want to be there every day, if you want to go to work every day, and also to never be afraid to ask questions because you're always learning, and to always keep an open mind because you might think you know what you're doing, but sometimes you might not. Or, you know, sometimes other people might not know what they're doing, and you want to be able to guide them and to be able to just make your whole like job easier for everyone. I think that's what I really, really hold true to myself, is just to that work environment matters and that you should always just be yourself. Don't be something that you're not. And it's okay to be afraid.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to be honest, like you said, with yourself and with others, kind of about where you're going. And again, that sort of, that job search piece can make us question, I think, ourselves and our values. And so trying to reaffirm who you are and what matters to you, I think is really important. So I don't think we had any other questions in the chat unless I missed them. So I think maybe we'll, Jeff, do you mind, we'll cycle back to our last question and just see if there's anything. I think the panelists honestly have given a lot of helpful advice and tips, but anything else just that you think could be helpful for current students or alums who are potentially kind of job searching, or any resources that you use as you're kind of working through your process will be really helpful. I think this will probably be our last question as well.
I guess I just kind of want to emphasize a little bit on like the resources available to you through UIC, where a lot of people don't really interact with the career resources or know what's available at UIC. So even just knowing that there are like LinkedIn workshops that you can join to better present yourself and your skills is something that you can take advantage of. You can do virtual interviews. People are very much focused on their resume, and then you don't really know how to make your resume better. And something I've learned is almost each industry has a different format of what they think looks best for a resume. So my input on a good resume is not applicable to my friends in computer science. So reaching out to people through the career services UIC has, through colleges, through specific majors is very helpful to kind of see and have that back and forth of, okay, I got feedback on my resume, let me go make those changes, let me bring it back to get further feedback on. And I think that's something I took part in my last few months at UIC, and it was very helpful because when I did get into actually applying, I would have people at like the career fair or at in-person interviews be impressed by the layout of my resume. And as people who look at thousands of resumes all the time, that was a very big deal to me, that, all right, I've already captured them, that my resume looks impressive. Now let me capture them with the content on it. Let me talk about the things on there. And I think just availing those resources is very helpful. Yeah.
Thanks for the shout out. I know the Engineering Career Center really appreciates that. But UIC Career Services work with all the students in all colleges. And like you said, business, LES, and public health also have career centers. And we're here to help you. I always tell students and alumni, you pay for all of these services, right, in your fees and in your tuition, and use them as much as you can. And there's no limit on how often you can meet with advisors to get help with your resume, prepping for interviews, grad school applications, going over grad school essays. We're here to help you achieve whatever your career goals are. And it's okay if you don't know what they are. We can kind of help you sort that out as well. So thanks for that shout out. Anything else?
I think on top of like the actual like career services and all these resources that UIC have, one of the most important resources I think is other students and other people kind of in your group. Because I know that I would not have gotten where I was if I didn't have like my close friends and people I met on LinkedIn that kind of helped me through interview prep and talking to me about the industry and kind of pointing me in the right direction to get to where I am. So and that kind of goes both ways. So now that I'm in a position where I can help people, I'm always sending people resources and saying, hey, there's a job here that I think you really fit into, go apply for it. And I think that's kind of where we can help each other is, if you see something that works for other people that might not work for you, send it over to them and, talk to each other and be as helpful as you can to everyone.
Aditya, that was such a great way of explaining networking, because I think sometimes people feel like it's like slimy or, it's kind of weird, but really it's just helping other people. It's having conversations. Sometimes you're the person who's trying to get the help, right? If you're the applicant, sometimes you're in a position where you can help others. And it's really just a conversation and sort of supporting and empowering other people. And sometimes you need that help too. I think networking can have a negative connotation, but I think it's really about kind of creating that circle of support with professors, with advisors, with, like you said, colleagues and other students. Thank you for kind of explaining that in a really, I think, strengths-based way.
For me, I think, well, they hit a lot of the points that I love, but I catered my resume to every position that I applied to, and I never sent in the same resume or CV for anything. So I think it's really important to look at what the position you're applying to and kind of see what your strengths are and could be in that position and put that on your resume. And then kind of just listing out your weaknesses as well, because those are good things to also say in an interview, because the people that are interviewing you are like, oh, they recognize this, at least they know about it and are able to build on and become stronger.
Yeah, no, I think that your point about tailoring your resume and cover letter is so important. So at the university, sometimes this probably, Jeff and Allison probably can speak to this too, but sometimes we're on hiring committees. So we're hiring other advisors or, other professionals we're going to work with at UIC. And sometimes we have like 100 resumes and cover letter to go through. We can decide which applicants we're going to bring in, for a phone interview. And as somebody who might look at like 50 resumes and cover letters as part of that search committee, I can tell within probably 30 seconds whether or not this resume is tailored and cover letters tailored to the position that we're trying to fill, or if it's just kind of like a generic resume. And I can tell you, when we have 50 resumes, like we're probably going to maybe invite 7 people, in for interviews. So your resume has to be tailored so that way it seems like this is what you want. Like we know that you want a job, but we want the company and the employer, they want to know, do you want that job or you're just trying to get any job? It's almost a little bit like potentially dating. They want to know you love them. And so your resume and cover letter has to kind of speak to them in a way that's genuine, that you showed you've been on their website, you looked at their social media, you have a sense of what they do, and you think you're a good fit, and you can kind of articulate why you're a good fit based on how you display your experience on your resume. So thank you guys for that. Those are great pieces of tips and advice and resources that you use that potentially could be helpful for other people. Any other questions or anything else that attendees want to know as we're wrapping up? I know that Allison put the link for the evaluation in the chat. We'd love to hear what you think about this kind of event, any suggestions you have for us for the future, things that were helpful for you. Jeff, thank you for putting the career services website into the chat as well. And then, yeah, so other questions, anything else we can help you with? And then the link for our offices as well. We would like your feedback in the survey. I'm actually going to put it in the chat. I will just put, we have an email address. So if you're trying to make an appointment, you want to get started to work with career services, I'll put that in the chat as well. But as we're kind of wrapping up, any last questions, anything else folks want to know on this important topic? That I will say, the panelists, man, you guys did a really impressive job of covering a lot of different areas and topics in a short amount of time. That was, and thank you for being honest. Again, this topic can be exciting, but also can be very anxiety producing. And I appreciate your candidness and all of just the great tips and just pieces of feedback you shared with us and with everyone who's here. Got a big shout out from AARCC, which makes sense. I think you all have just a lot to share professionally, but also kind of your campus involvement clearly made an impact on you. And again, thanks for being honest about how this can be a difficult process, but also, right, there's a light at the end of the tunnel as far as kind of how things work out. And your major can be important, it cannot be important. It kind of depends on your search and what you're looking for. Again, we love your feedback, things you liked, things that were helpful, suggestions you have if maybe there's future topics you're looking for. We'd love to hear about that as well. And we really appreciate everyone's time. Panelists, big virtual hug for you and for sharing and also spending the time with us. You're all working, so we know you're taking time out of your busy day to spend time with us and to help us learn from your experiences and your journey.